probability trading strategy, you're full of crap.
If things aren't working, then that's a quick trip to the poorhouse.
To learn how to drive the beater before you can drive the Lamborghini.
Now you're playing with the house's money.
Wow, you're playing with the house's money. Hey,
yeah,
Mike, so many times we're asking just the wrong question. So and we ask the wrong questions. And today's session, before today's session's ended, you're going to learn how to ask the right questions to become a better trader. I think that's a pretty cool deal. And so, because what if focusing on why traders fail is actually holding a trader back from real success. Because everybody talks about 90% of traders fail, but what if the real edge comes from modeling? And we'll save that until we get into the section, but modeling something else. So today we're going to flip the script on that. But what do you think about that? The aspect of so much focus on the negative rather than the positive. What's up with that?
Yeah, I think you're totally right to say that questions are the answer. I think many a great philosopher actually think that Einstein had said that too, that questions are the answer. Asking the right questions. If you give it an hour to solve something, spend the first 55 minutes finding out what the right question to ask is, and the last 5 minutes trying to answer that question.
Wow. That's cool. And
yeah.
So what did you say? That the answers are questions are the right answer.
So
are the
focus
answer
on asking the right questions.
Yeah. So guys, if you're keeping notes on this, which I don't know if you are or not, but maybe you're watching this after the session and the recorded session, answers and questions are the answer. And so say that one more time, because I want to make sure I write it down right.
Yes, questions are the answer. So if you have an hour to solve something, spend the first 55 minutes figuring out the right question to ask, and then spend the last 5 minutes answering that question.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Do you spend more time asking the question why, or do you spend more time asking the question how?
That's a great question in itself.
Okay.
I think that it depends on what the problem is.
Yeah. So I think
I think that you could have several layers to the question that you ask.
Okay. So you layer your questions down. Do you ever get too deep in asking the questions? In other words,
there's a beauty in simplicity, but simplicity comes from deep thought. There's a difference between simplistic and simple.
Yes.
I would say that if you're very surface level, you might ask an overly simplistic question, not really give it a ton of thought. But the person that's sitting there that's really contemplating the right kind of questions to ask, they might end up with a very simple, straightforward question. It's not a question that's a paragraph long, but something that is simple, that gets at the heart of what it is that we're trying to figure out. That can be a simple one line, and to somebody that hasn't thought deeply might think like, well, what are you asking here? But the person that has sat there and contemplated it'll be rich.
So when you do this exercise, and we're going to be sharing with everybody about how you can work this into your trading, but as you do this exercise, Mike, regarding trading, do you basically ask the question, then answer it while journaling and writing down what your answer is? Or are you talking to yourself? Maybe even recording yourself would be a great way to do that, and then you can put it on you can get that transcribed later.
Yeah, all of that is fantastic. You could talk to yourself, right? Make sure that you're in a private area, so that way somebody sitting across from you doesn't think that you're nuts.
Okay.
You could record yourself, sure. have that transcript. I love doing that. You could type out a message to yourself. Then what you could also do, and what I'll do this frequently myself. I'll take those transcripts. I'll take the dialogue that I've written out, and I'll throw it into something like a chat GPT and ask
Yeah.
that to help to analyze it and start to dig through some of that stuff. And the results that you end up with, the kind of clarity that you could get from somebody like that, having like a co-pilot, if you
Yeah.
will, can be very helpful.
Yeah.
And just
Especially if you've trained up your GPT on, so that it is aware of where you're coming out from a business standpoint or a trader's or a personal standpoint. And I'm not talking about giving away the farm, but you can coach the GBTs or Grok up so it knows a lot about your business. A lot of, maybe it's just, you want to specifically identify doing trades.
Mhm,
And just you can throw in a couple of books in there. You can throw in either Mike's book or my book or both our books
mhm.
into, and let ChatGPT actually review them. And then you have another baseline. Then you throw in your questions and your answers and say, hey, go bounce this against Mike's book to see how it resonates. And in case you're wondering, we're hitting it early. Let's make sure I got the right one to do this week. There we go. There's Mike's book, everybody. The
Mhm.
Trading Mind Wheel. And also my book, Trade Your Way to Freedom, which is basically retire sooner with more money and less fear. Okay, now that we've
Beautiful,
paid for this
beautiful.
no, paid for this broadcast, no, just having some fun with everybody. So I love that concept, and I think when I ask the question, do you ask why or do you ask how? I did that for a reason, and the reason is oftentimes I find that people who focus only on asking why questions
Mhm.
can tend to have a victim mentality. Now,
Mm.
let me
Okay.
clarify that is that they go, why did this trade go against me? Why does the market hate me? Why? And the why turns into wah. And
Sure
and
can.
huh?
It sure can.
And rather than saying, you know, because they're always thinking about what's outside themselves.
Mhm.
Why is this happening to me? Rather
Mm.
than asking the question, maybe this is happening to me because I'm not as good as I think I am as a trader. So what
Mm.
and how can I improve? Then that gives a person the I think the bricks and mortar to start constructing a strong trading plan and process. That was really good. No.
Beautiful. Yeah. Deep. Diving into the deep end of the pool to kick things off.
I know, gosh, I got to take my floaties off, and so when you're teaching, have you taught your daughter how to swim?
No, no, I can barely float myself. I learned how to swim late, so Melissa's in charge of teaching her how to swim. She's actually a very good swimmer. She goes off the diving board. She's been doing that since she was about 5.
Okay, but when I bet you when she first got started, she'd wear those floaties around their arms, like
Oh,
up
sure,
here.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and our boys did too, and especially our grandkids and all that kind of stuff. But at some point, you have to take the floaties off. At
Mhm,
some point. And again, just ask yourself: are you the kind of trader that's just still trying to float around in their floaties? And in reality, hey, I need to learn how to swim. So, hey,
mm.
forget the doom and gloom stats. Are you ready to become the exception to the 90-10 rule? So, Mike, when in your personal story did you make the decision? Okay, I'm tired of being the victim of my own mistakes.
I think that decision came not I started to make that shift when I first discovered O'Neill and discovered the IBD meetups, and that's when I started to get more into doing that kind of work. But it was when I started to get around the people at the IBD meetup and started to bounce some ideas off of them, and I started to gain the confidence that, hey, this isn't just something that somebody out there says that it could be done. It's somebody that's right here, right in front of my face, that's telling me and showing me that, yes, this can be done, and here's how. That's when I started to take things a little bit more seriously. And some of the ways that I could tell that I was taking it more seriously was in the work that I was doing. So doing the work consistently, not and beyond just like screening for stocks and trying to find out, well, what's the story and all this, but to do the journaling, to do the post analysis, the things that we were being taught in that group in that meetup, and then to take things a few steps further of starting to go to conferences, starting to go to workshops and get
Yeah.
additional education. It's not where I'm like, all right, I'm gonna take this seriously, and it was like it on this specific day, but just in thinking back to the types of actions that I was taking, there's a clear evolution that took place.
Yeah. So, yeah,
How about you?
for me, it was a real humbling thing. Uh, not what I had to do, and when I say humbling, I had to make a decision to
Really?
humble myself into, okay, to become coachable, teachable, and all that kind of stuff. I was
Mhm,
sick and tired of the results I was getting because they were really piss poor.
mhm,
And so and I kept losing money, blowing up accounts and all that type of stuff. And I had to finally come down to those kind of questions. Okay, what is going on here? You know, what am I doing that's causing me to to do this, this way? And what it turned out to
mhm,
be, I was an impulsive, compulsive trader, shoot from the hip kind of guy,
mhm,
which was part of my personality. I mean, it was really
mhm,
part of my personality. Former jet pilot with the Navy, that kind of stuff. And I did a lot of risky, dangerous stuff.
mhm,
And even after I stopped flying, we were doing demolition on buildings, blowing them up, and all that kind of stuff. And I had a lot of fun doing that.
mhm.
However, I found out it was less fun blowing up my accounts. That was terrible, right? And so one of them is constructive, one of them is totally destructive. And it's then
And
that I
both of them
started
can happen at a push of a button.
yeah, without a without a doubt. Yeah. This can be your plunger. Um, and those who are familiar with ordnance know what I'm talking about. So it came to the point of figuring out, okay, I need to get some better education. I
Mhm,
cannot, just and so part of the thing, as you said, I started reading the books. I started reading O'Neill's, the making money in the stock market and this type of thing, and then started applying it. Uh, the thing that was really funny though is I think that slowed me down in my process is I read, but I did a terrible job of application. In other words, I was gaining the knowledge, but I was still trying to hold on to my impulsive and compulsive ways, and that
mm,
was a terrible combination. It was just because I would go along really good for a while, and then all of a sudden, I would just chuck everything and go back to total impulsive, compulsive, and start blowing things up again. And it
mhm,
was finally when I got down to the point of to rid myself from impulsiveness and compulsiveness and emotional type trading of going with a mechanical system that's based on strong rules and I would and with the aspect of the only thing I had to measure then or that I needed to measure was measure how well am I following my process. The results took care of themselves. So, the question I have for hey, if you're out there, guys, don't be a ghost. Let me ask you this question: what kind of questions are driving your trade decisions? Are you even asking questions? Just type in a Y or an N. Are you even asking yourself questions about how you're trading? And let us know who's out there too, guys, because we know you're there. We can see you. No, we can't see
Mm.
you, but so so Mike, now let's break down some of the wrong questions traders ask them, they get stuck on, and why they almost guarantee you'll never break out of the 90%. So,
Yeah, so we've
wh-
got a few good ones there.
yeah, so why don't you jump into those? Yeah, those are pretty
Yeah,
good.
yeah. How do I get rich fast, Dennis? Tell me how I could get rich fast. Or better
Okay.
yet, tell me what's the one indicator or secret system that will guarantee my success.
Okay. Well, just totally following either you or me. It will be the total. No, I'm just
Oh
joking.
yeah, yeah. Well, there you go. Just take my
Although
money and
I'm not
let's get
joking in
on
a
with it.
way, because we do follow a process that has been proven. So what's that?
Mm,
What's the one indicator secret system? And one of the things that's a great question. And I think one of the
mm.
other things is, why do I always screw up? Now, when you
Yeah,
start
that's a
asking
great
yourself
question.
questions like that, the the issues may run a little bit deeper.
Mm.
and and
It's a great question to ask yourself if you want to stay stuck and beat yourself up. It's
yeah.
you don't want to frame things in that way.
Yeah, and if you find yourself asking that kind of question, I'll tell you what you need is you need a mentor. You need somebody. Now the mentor can be out of a book. The mentor can be a real person. No, whether if you write a book, you're a real person. But uh,
Mm,
you can read Mark Douglas's book. Which is an excellent book for coaching, mentoring, all that kind of stuff. But there's something that is just transformative if you have a live mentor who can, one, give you feedback on the questions you're asking, and,
mhm.
and which is very, very critical because regardless of how good the book is, the book's not going to give you feedback when you have a question. And in reality, while ChatGPT or Grok, yeah, you can get some questions answered there, and they're probably really good answers to the questions, but it's still not the same thought process that a real live coach would walk you through. Uh, but
Yeah.
I want to hit. Do you want to take the how do I get rich fast part? Why is that such a big stumbling block? Because I mean, we all want to make money when we trade, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it by itself, I don't think that it's a terrible question. I think that the problem with it is that most people stop there. And so what you end
Mm,
up is something like, and I just looked up this river because we all know the phrase a mile wide and an inch deep, but it's actually the Platte River, if I'm saying that correctly, in
okay.
Nebraska. That's a mile
Oh,
wide
yeah,
and an inch deep. So
yeah.
you don't want to do that, especially when it comes to your trading, and especially when it comes to the kind of questions and research that you ask. If you want to get rich quick, well, wonderful. Well, what? Why is that something that's important to you? Define quick, define rich, and what are you willing to do it? And do you have the skill sets to do it? What kind of skill sets are needed in order to do those things? How do you acquire them? And that's where when as you start to dig deeper into a fairly simple question like that, right? It's only a few words.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that I'll throw this out is, have you ever read The Richest Man in Babylon?
I have, yeah. I actually like that book quite a bit.
And I picked up the audio version, and when I've been out doing my exercise and running, uh, I listened to it on the way, right? And it's really amazing because woven throughout that story is the exuberance of youth thinking, I want to get rich fast and I want to get rich easy.
Mm,
Both those mindsets throughout this book led to the men, that the young men, going into slavery. They became a
Mm.
slave of something. Now, by having that kind of mentality, because
Yeah.
oftentimes fast money and or trying to get rich quick is done because the person didn't have the experience. They
Mm.
didn't have their reps in. They didn't have a solid plan in place,
Mhm.
and that would you know boost them on their way. And most of them then realized after they wound up in some very precarious situations, or I mean literally being slaves with chains around their necks. And while we don't have that kind of slavery, any longer, we
Mhm.
can have metaphorical chains around our necks and chains around our feet that are, what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
I know I
indeed. I think that that's the perfect analogy to think of all this stuff. You're a slave to emotions, a slave to a poor mindset. If you're asking questions like, "Why do I always screw up?" That I think that that's a form of slavery,
yeah.
where you're just a slave to these limiting beliefs that you have, a
Ooh,
slave
yeah.
to your past, perhaps.
And I have to say that that's where I was, probably for the first, I would say 10 years that 5 to 10 years that I traded. Well,
Hmm.
5 years for sure, because it was in that next 5, from year 5 through year 10 is when I changed course. I
Hmm.
I I trim my sail to take me to the destination I am today. Now, I did take the scenic route in order to get there, and it took me longer than a lot of other people uh, uh, did, because even though I trimmed my sails the right way, uh, I failed to untie myself from the dock so I could
Mm.
actually get out and do the sailing and all that type of stuff, because where where ships are supposed to be. They're supposed to be out, our sailboats are supposed to be out sailing, not sitting at the dock. And so that's one of the things that I did. So even let's see, here's something wild. Even outside of trading, only about, oh, this is, oh my god, I gotta save this for I can't tell you about this right now. Well, I'll have to save it for the next session, but,
Oh, come
uh,
on, Dennis.
no, but,
All
so
right, all right.
we have people stuck in a loop. So, what about some of the people you coach? Do you have anybody who basically, is asking the wrong questions? You don't
Uh,
you don't
yeah,
have to say
well,
who it is, but what kind of questions are they asking themselves that are wrong questions besides the one we had already talked about?
well, uh, I'd rather frame it as at one point or another, we've all asked the wrong questions, or have thought of things in a way that's not leading us to the path of the outcome that we're hoping for. And I think that there's an evolutionary process that we're all on, myself included.
Okay.
So some examples of thinking about, well, what are the types of questions that I, or well, what might be some of the questions that are asked where I might be led astray about, thinking about profits in terms of dollar amounts.
Mm,
Well, when we think of profits in dollar amounts, it carries a certain, that there's, it tends to make us think, it tends to anchor us into a certain spot. Kind of like, well, what your dock analogy. I think that's actually a good one
right.
for anchoring, and well, with thinking in, profits in terms of dollars. Because if we think of profits in terms of dollars, then we thinking, oh, I'm up $1,000, I'm up $2,000, and that dollar amount has a significance for us. then we're likely to make decisions based on that versus it being based on a percentage. A percentage can scale, a dollar amount can't. So if we
Okay, yeah,
can, if we're
that's good.
thinking in terms of percentages, let's say 10% of $1,000, 10% of $10,000, 10% of $100,000, you're still dealing with 10%.
Right on, right on. So yeah, it kind of reminds me that by thinking and dealing in dollar amounts, I
Hmm.
think a person can actually put a lid or a ceiling on their capacity to earn. What I mean by that,
Absolutely.
what I mean by that is most of us come into trading from a world where we had a job that either
Hmm.
paid us a salary. I know in the military we were paid twice a month, then it was always the same thing, and so that's the lifestyle that we got used to. When I
Yep.
worked for corporations, same. Uh,
Yep.
uh,
Same here.
yeah, and then when I started working for myself or doing my own business, it was it was different. It basically took the lid off, but I had a mindset of here's how much I make per year, and so that's
Hmm.
my limitation, and or that's my cap. And so
Hmm.
thinking past that from a trading perspective was almost impossible because my mind was still stuck in a salary type mentality where I need
Hmm.
to be stuck in a let's work the process because there's unlimited opportunities with that. And so
Oh,
like
okay.
some of my mentors used to tell me, you have to earn your size, which goes
Mhm.
back to, and what that means is that when you first start out, you're not going to take $1,000 and turn it into $5,000 in 3 months or 2 months. Typically,
Right.
that's not. However, it takes time to do that, to learn the process, get your reps in, and then by the end, let's say the end of 6 months, all of a sudden you have increased your capital to trade with from $1,000 to $2,000. That's 100%
Right.
gain, guys. Then, as you said, your 10% of $2,000 is much more than 10% of 1,000, right? And then let's say
Mhm.
you double your trading capital again by the end of the year. So now you're looking at $4,000. And again, if your target is, let's say, 5% per month, that gives you a completely, 4,000 bucks at $5,000. What is that? 200 bucks? No, something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, 200 bucks on a weekly basis, which
Yeah.
equates to $800 for the year. But it's breaking it down like that, so I'm not focused on the results, but I'm focused on the process that will gain this for me, and then taking the cap off, taking the lid off, and saying, the sky literally is the limit. And one of the things I think we traders need, can wrap our mind around is we have the potential to earn a full-time salary, whatever that is, for you, whatever your mindset
Mhm.
is, but a full-time salary with part-time effort,
It
which
takes a
which
while to get there.
yes, it does. But that's really absolutely, one of the things that I think is really cool. So here's something wild, Mile. Okay, it's time for me to share what this was.
Yeah.
Is
All right.
we focus that 90% of the people, typically fail in trading. There's a
Mhm.
very interesting thing on that why, and the other question is you ask, well, why did the 10%, not fail? So here's something wild. Even outside of trading, only about 1 in 10 people actually stick to a self-improvement plan. So when you put that into the trading perspective, the same 10% rule seems to show up everywhere, not and trading including. So it's just the personality of people, and again, that's across the population. Only 10% are willing to do what it takes to become. Maybe it's to become more fit, physically fit. Maybe it's to, run a marathon, whatever. So
Mhm.
maybe it's not just about trading at all, but it's about whether you stick to a process. So are you treating trading like a skill to master or just a way
Mhm.
to get rich quick? Oh, that's a heavy question.
Yeah, I
So
think so. I'd be curious if we polled the audience to see where people would anonymously put themselves.
Well, I don't know if they would. I don't know if they would. That would be an interesting question. Where would you put yourself? Are you a person who sticks to it? If you are, just put a Y. And I bet you the people who don't stick to things won't put an N. I'm just
Yeah,
betting.
I think so. I think so. But I also think that if you're listening to a podcast like this, we probably have a larger portion of people, right? Like, I don't think that our audience is average. I would think that we would have a larger portion than 10% of people in our audience that actually does put in the work and uh, are on the path to getting
I, I
to these sort of goals. Yeah.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, I agree with that wholeheartedly. That if a person is tuned into this, or if they watch the recording of it, yeah, you know, you are on the path, or maybe you're already there, of becoming a 10 percenter. I mean, I think you need we should do a little badge that says, I am a 10 percenter, and we could send it out to people. And so, hey, coming
There you
up,
go.
uh, what if you started asking the questions that the 10% ask? The consistent winners are focused on, instead of failing or falling for the get rich quick trap. And we're going to break that down with our next question, which is the
All right.
90% mindset and why it's a dead end. So diving into focus on, okay, dive in. Where am I? Where am I? Okay, here we go. So what happens when you focus your energy on avoiding pain instead of pursuing mastery? Huh, Mike?
When you're avoiding pain instead of pursuing mastery, you're thinking of pain as a punishment.
Mm, okay.
Pain is not necessarily a punishment. When you think about pain or there's something that's getting beaten, think of it a lot like a steel sword.
Yeah.
Right? You could have like a sword there that's made out of some iron that hasn't gone through the furnace, and maybe it's okay. But that's the kind of sword that you bash it a few times, it's gonna break in half. But then
Yeah.
you take another sword that's been that has that blacksmith there that's pounding away at it, that's sharpening it, that's refining it. That's the kind of sword that when you take that into battle, that's going to last and it's going to help you win the war. That being put through the crucible is there pain involved? Sure, but it's not a punishment. It's there to make you stronger. So
Yeah.
with that kind of reframe in mind for the pain that you have to go through for improvement, if you're thinking of it as this is what it takes for me to get stronger, then I think that that's a better way to think of it than, oh, the this hurts, I'm being punished somehow, and then you're just going to give up. If you think of it as part of the process, I think that you're
Yeah.
thinking well.
I love that analogy. That analogy about the sword and being flame tested or flame treated.
Mhm.
But it reminds me of something also, and let me throw a little bit more into that sword uh, uh, analogy. Is that the Babylonians back in the day, they were known for their bronze weaponry, right? And it
Mhm.
was stronger, better than rocks and or stone uh, type of weapons, and certainly better than some of the lower grade materials. Well, to make bronze, you actually need two other components, three components actually. You need tin, which is
Hmm.
by itself is a very weak, not a very strong material, and
Hmm.
you need copper, which also is a not a real strong type of material, but when combined, so when you and I tell you a story about this because part of becoming a master trader is combining maybe, and part of it maybe it's the recognition of your weaknesses
Mm.
and how you are going to get around that, but then that combines to make you a bronze type of trader who now you had, and then that's treated by in the fire as a third component, and that's what makes the transformation happen to make it a strong weapon that can be sharpened to cut through all the at the consequences of your trading. So just a thought there.
Yeah, that's solid. What are some of the things that you're mixing together?
Oh gosh. I think two major things that I mix together in my trading is the to be prepared, no,
Hmm.
be patient and be prepared. And that becomes kind of like my trading mantra, my trading uh, um, uh, what I say, and I'll basically I'll actually sign off on emails that I send out to people is be patient, be prepared. And it goes back to what my mentor many years ago told me,
Mm.
because I would get antsy. I'd want to make a trade even though things weren't right because I was afraid. I had fear
Mm.
that I was going to miss out, miss the move. And what he told me, what Dave told me, he says, Dennis, he goes, you know, be patient because the best trade of the year comes around about every 2 weeks.
Hmm. Indeed.
And indeed it does. And it's okay. But, so many traders out there, and again, it comes back to mindset. It comes back to going through the reps. I've seen it enough times now that, no stock chart is exactly the same as another stock chart, but there's some darn good similarities that you learn
Yeah.
the similarities, then you start becoming a wiser trader. Um,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
that's so. What about you? What about you?
For me, the
Yeah,
things that I look at that have really helped me, well, we mentioned them last week, but really thinking it in the market through this three-dimensional lens that I have
right on.
here of general market, your system, and personal performance, and then where those three overlap, that's going to give me either the green signal, the yellow signal, or the red signal. Uh, to help me figure out, well, should I be stepping on the gas and really starting to press? Should I be moving a cash or somewhere in between? That
Right on.
just this simple framework has really helped me out quite a bit. The three lenses of market readiness. That's what I call it.
So I got a question for you. Okay, one of the things that a lot of times people get stuck in the aspect of paralysis by analysis, or now, yeah,
Yeah,
analysis paralysis, whatever you want to call it. They're always worried about failure. And they, the when you think about something, if you're thinking about failure, guess what you're going to do? You're going to fail because
mhm,
we sabotage. Because you're going to sabotage your progress. So one of the
sure.
question I have is how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that? Like, do you have a time limit on how long, like, let's say you're looking, watching your watch list over the weekend, you're going through picking the stocks, but let's say there's a
Mhm,
weekend where there's just nothing. There's just no setups. There's just,
right.
you coming up and the cupboards are bare.
Okay.
Where's your cutoff time? Where
Well,
do you
that's
say,
real
okay,
simple. If the cupboards are bare, then you don't eat. That you just sit and it's your fasting season, right? You sit on your
okay,
hands and you wait. I'm not going to start eating sawdust because there's nothing in the cupboard, And thankfully, in trading, you could just sit there for as long as it takes. You don't have to
yeah,
put on a trade that's subpar just because you want some activity. You're actually a lot better off sitting and waiting for the high quality stuff to show up. So that way,
right on.
well, when it does, you're not trying to dig yourself out of a hole because you were so busy just scrounging around for subpar trades. Now you're actually on firm ground. The good trade comes, then that's bringing you to equity curve highs right away. And
Right
that's
on.
what I
Right
like
on.
to do.
Yeah, one of the things that I was recently reading a little bit about Jesse Livermore, and he had a fantastic stop loss. And I have a time stop loss on when I do my trades. That basically,
Hmm.
if it hasn't moved within 2 weeks, I'm gone. I get out of it.
Hmm.
Jesse Livermore's stop loss was 2 to 3 days. In other words, if a stock didn't go the direction he expected it to go, he got out within that time frame in 2 to 3 days.
Hmm.
If it didn't go in the direction he expected to go, and so that may be a really great topic, Mike, for us to tackle in the future. Is let's walk through like Jesse Livermore had like 10 rules of trading. Wouldn't that be kind of fun to walk through? Jesse Livermore's 10 rules of trading to see if they still hold water today? Are they still applicable? That's a thought. And so,
Hmm.
if you're listening to this, just leave a note down in the chat to say, yeah, we want to hear about Jesse. Um, one of the uh, the follow-on question I have for that. Okay, you said yes, you walk away from when there's nothing to trade, but what kind of time limit do you set on that? In other words, let's say your typical time to review all your stocks is 15 minutes and you
Okay.
don't find anything. And this was a trap that I used to fall into. And so after that 15 minutes, I hadn't found anything. So I would shift over and start looking at other lists, or I would start, even though the market was really ugly, I'd start looking at other places, or I would keep searching past my 15-minute time limit for finding a
Hmm.
particular finish trade until I thought I had found a trade, but it was typically one of those lower quality setups.
Right.
And so, what do you tell yourself when you say, "Up, there's just nothing to trade. I'm stepping away."
Well, when I'm thinking about it through these lenses, it helps me to recognize that, hey, you know what? It might not be an optimal time to trade. So if I do end up finding something, maybe I need to start to scale down a little bit, right? Because
Okay.
it's not the because well, when it's the ideal trading environment, it's like the fish are jumping out of the water and into the boat. Like that,
Yeah.
that's the kind of environment that you want to be pressing. If they're really just trying to find something and then maybe find one that's semi okay and you're thinking about it, well, if you are going to go about it, okay, fine. But uh, for me, it would influence how I'm going to size that trade,
Okay.
and I'd be sizing significantly smaller.
Yeah. So one of the things I do, and I just throw this out for people to chew on, is I have an alternative task that I'll go and do. In other words, I can't
Okay.
find a stock to trade, but I want to be trading because that's why we call ourselves traders, right?
Hmm.
So I'll go and I will do simulated trades. In other words, I will go back in and go back in time using on demand or using trading view to run back and just practice my trading. And I find that having that as a substitute activity for actually trading can be really, really great. A great
Hmm.
way to pacify that need of I need to, I want to be trading. So So, hey guys, we're giving you the exact questions. The top, we're about to give you the exact questions the top 10% ask themselves every week or every month. This is where everything starts to change. So, what are the right questions the 10% ask? And so, here's the big question that the 10%ers ask: is what is here's a good question to ask yourself. What is the 10% of traders doing to be successful?
Hmm.
So why, and so what are some of the other questions? What am I willing to master regardless of the outcome? What am I willing to give up to become a master? How do I turn every loss into feedback, not defeat? Which process, habits, routines are not negotiable for me? I mean, these are great questions, and these are really good. Uh, so walk through how asking these questions changes your approach and your performance. Mike, how do questions like this, and what questions would you add to these would be the right question or the questions that the 10% ask?
Sure. Well, first off, I think that the way that uh, you framed the questions here are far more powerful, far more empowering, and gets you thinking on something that's expansive versus something that's contracted. And I think
Hmm.
that that's where growth mindset lives. If you're thinking growth here, you're thinking in these more process driven, more forward thinking versus something that's looking for a quick fix or something that's beating yourself up. So that's a first thing that I would say. As far as the types of questions that I would ask myself, I in addition to what you've mentioned here, there were some good ones. Something that I like to ask myself is to reflect upon where I'm at right now in my life and how I'm able to integrate this stuff in, because it's great to think about these kind of questions, but how do I go about integrating it into where I'm at? That's one of the things that helped me to start to trade well as a part-timer, because when I started to hear about O'Neill and Minervini and all the people at the IBD meetups, uh, they were already trading professionally. So
Right, right.
it was great to learn from them, but how do I do this when I'm still managing 9 to 5, 9 to 6, have a commute and all this stuff? So asking the question of how can I take what they're doing and make it work for me forced me to think through ways of how I could be more efficient and what was
Mm,
absolutely necessary. That Occam's razor approach,
yeah,
and that's what helped me to come up with the process that I have today.
yeah. And so, yeah, one of the, gosh, many years ago when you and I first started, I think I was appearing on your podcast back then, but we were having a chat, and you made a statement. No, you were on the Bay Area Moneymakers IBD meetup group, did a live show there, but you
Mm,
made a statement about asking yourself the question, and I'm doing this from memory, but do I have the capacity? That you have to ask yourself the question about capacity. And I think what
yeah.
you just said hammers around that aspect of capacity, uh, because we do have a tendency. Now, am I stating that correctly? Asking
Yeah,
yourself,
absolutely. Yeah. So there's really three things, and this is probably the part that you're remembering. So the things that you need in order to for a system to work well for you, it has to match your beliefs, your goals, and your ability to execute. If though any of those three are missing, you run into problems. And the problem that I would run into, or back at that point that I started to run into, was ability to execute. My knowledge started to far surpass what I was able to execute, right? Because I'm learning from these people that are doing this full time, that are all in, and I only have a couple of hours at night trying to figure this stuff out. That's
yeah,
where, trying to pick and choose. Well, how can I how can I be more focused? How can I do part of this and maybe not go quite as deep on some of the other ones, and maybe have like one setup that I'm looking at, or start to um, maybe start to outsource some of the research, find something that aligns with me, that I could take this, trust it, and then I'm not doing my own screening and all this kind of stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here getting some great ideas about future episodes, and that be maybe one of the episodes we do in the future is um, uh, uh, you know how to trade part time, and
Yeah.
just show people how to do it, because I know in your professional life, my professional life, the I was trading for the last 10 years of my professional life. I
Mm.
was trading, but just covering, and I know you probably were also, but just we could put something together just to show people, okay, here's the steps, guys. Here's how to become more of an efficient and effective trader. And how does that
Right.
sound to the people who are listening? Does that sound like it? That would just give us a thumbs up, or a Y down in the comments to say, yeah, that would be something I would be very much interested in. And
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that everybody's able to do this. It's not where you don't need to necessarily be a big hedge fund manager. You don't need to
right on,
be you don't need to be trying to win some sort of a championship, but you could
right,
build something for yourself that's going to provide you with consistent returns.
yeah.
And can you do that part time? Absolutely. I think that the proof is in the pudding here.
Yeah, because one of the things, and again, it comes to adjusting your expectations. And let's say
Mhm.
is it possible for somebody to build a part-time trading business? And I say
Yep.
that because that's what it is, a trading
Yep.
business that would generate, let's keep it small, that would generate an extra $500 per month. And
Hmm.
and the fact of the matter is yes. And guess what? You don't have to be watching the charts all day long to make something like that. I
Hmm.
know with my system, it's totally automated. I mean, I basically put in my orders. I put in my orders last night, and
Hmm.
basically I'm writing on 7 entities that I want to trade this week.
Hmm.
I target shoot where I want to enter, and then if
Hmm.
I'm filled, my orders automatically then my orders are already placed for my where I'll take profits or get stopped out.
Yeah,
I'm
so you're
done.
doing all the prep at night on weekends, and then
Yeah.
during the day, it's basically set and forget.
Yeah, yeah. During the day, I'm taking care of the honeydews that my wife wants me to do. So, anyway, hey guys, remember if you want to go deeper into building real wealth, check out Mike's website over on itsmarwealth.com, right, Mike?
Yep, yep.
Okay.
Narrowwealth.com.
Yeah, for some practical tools, community support, and then also I think he provides access to his Discord channel there. So coming up, we'll show you exactly what the 10% do day in, day out. And almost nobody else is talking about this, because you know what? A lot of times the 10% is very quiet about what they do. They're not over there
Mm,
on Instagram, test driving their Lamborghinis. They're just,
right.
they're driving around in their Honda Civics.
Hmm.
No, no, I'm just joking with that. So let's see what the top 10% actually do, that nobody talks about is, okay, the revealed, okay, they obsess over process, not outcome. They
Hmm.
have routines, journaling, reviewing trades with honesty, the review and reflect that Mike's already talked about it. They're ruthless. I love this ruthless risk management.
Yeah,
They don't move their
absolutely.
stops except to tighten them.
Yep.
They position size
Yep.
appropriately. If the market conditions suck, they use smaller position size. they're never risking too much on one individual trade.
Yeah,
They
and
have
on top of that too, they're managing drawdowns off of equity curve highs. Throw that in there.
exactly, exactly, and uh, they they're look for consistency over perfection. Let's stop there a second. Okay, consistency over
Okay.
perfection. So
Mhm.
what the heck does that what is that what the heck does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think that if you're following your system, like how you were mentioning before, where what happens if you do all of your screening and everything, and you have your watch list, then it's like, well, all these trades are rubbish, right? That being consistent means that you're not going to go trade the rubbish trade, right?
Right on.
Like, are you going to go? Oh, I can't. There's nothing to eat, so I'm going to go pick something out of last night's trash. No, right? Like you're gonna sit and wait.
Yeah, yeah. So, what part of the thing also is, when you say that, pick this stuff out of, is learn to be bored. Be happy with boredom. Um, because if your system is if the market is basically acting the way it should for your system and process to work well,
Hmm.
guess what? It's going to be big yawners. I mean, the day so have
Yep.
some things to focus on through the day. So have other things lined up. Okay, like what do I do? Okay, I produce my YouTube channel. YouTube
Hmm.
videos. I put coaching things over there on Market Tech Talk. Um, I'm also finishing up the writing of a new book. We're basically changing some of the things with autopilot trading service. And
Oh
so
wow.
I'm doing business stuff. Okay. And so when are my times that I want to be in the market live?
Hmm.
Not in the morning.
Hmm.
I stay away from the open. My time to be in the market live is every day for the final hour. That's it. That's it. And
Yep.
all my other trading is done after hours using conditional orders. If you don't have it, if regardless of what your trading platform is, if you do not know how to do two things, one, know how to use conditional orders for your
Mhm.
platform, and then also have your trading platform loaded to your mobile device, you're
Hmm.
missing out
Very important.
because one, if I have my I have my system, I have my Thinkorswim platform, I have my Coinbase platform for trading crypto. I have it all loaded here. And
Yep.
so in case of an emergency, I can do my trades right there. The thing I like about the Thinkorswim platform on the phone is that they have their paper account available on their phone. So
Hmm.
if I'm really bored, I can practice I can practice trading there. Uh, but then I say that with caution because this can also become a habitual where you have to keep checking your screen, checking your P&L and all that kind of stuff. So
Oh sure.
I would say stick this in the drawer
That's
for a
exactly where
while.
my phone is at right now.
Yeah, and
I'm
so
not kidding either. Yeah, it's
so
in the drawer. That's a habit that I started during Lent because I saw that I was on my phone too much, and so one of the things that I wanted to give up was just looking at the phone all day long. So now it's staying in the drawer.
that's cool. So as you're doing Lent, you're able to actually start a new, more powerful habit of
Yeah.
of not being pulled away to your phone. So anyway, some of the other things you want to be. What are the other 10? What do the other 10% do? Is they seek help. One is they continue to improve themselves. They continue to educate themselves, but they just don't read the book and let it sit. They basically go to what they ask themselves another question: what do I need to do to apply what I've learned? Because Learning without application is just, is almost useless. You can write
Right.
it on, it is really useless. So, community and mentorship, surround yourself with accountability partners and people who call out your blind spots. Now, that can be challenging because we kind of don't want to know what our blind spots are. And I encourage you, if you are an accountability partner to somebody else, uh, and you both have agreed, hey, you can, call me out on the things that I need to improve. If you're the one person that is calling out the other person, start it off with, "Hey, you're really a remarkable guy." If it's true, okay, a remarkable person. And I know you're an excellent trader and all that kind of stuff. At the same time, but have you considered these things? It looks like you may be struggling here. In
Mm.
other words, don't necessarily just go jamming in there and say, "You dummy, you need to do X, Y, Z, and you'll be a better trader." Don't go in with that attitude.
Yeah, that generally doesn't help anyone. Even if you do know better, if you approach it in the wrong way, you end up doing more harm than good, and then all of a sudden it's almost as if you're speaking into the wind, and then uh, I I speak from experience, and I've seen this happen time and time again. Very well-meaning people that have knowledge but didn't take the step that Dennis just mentioned.
Mhm.
So make sure that when you're going to help someone, that you frame it in the right way, and you approach it gently.
All right. So, hey guys, I want to invite everybody here just to take a minute, write down 2 or 3 habits you have on your best trading days, and how can you make those non-negotiable. And you
Mhm.
can leave a note down here in the comments here on the live show, or if you put them on YouTube or over on Spotify, where we also appear, we'll basically respond to, whatever you say, and give you a good response on that. So here's something that will surprise you. The top 10% don't care about being right. They care
Mhm.
about being consistent. That is their superpower. So when it says they don't care about being right,
Mhm.
unpack that just a little bit for us.
Sure. So you want to be following your system, and your system should also have a way to review itself. So
Okay.
it's not where it's like, well, I want to go and see the sunrise, so I'm going to just keep on heading west, and I don't have any kind of course correction built in. Well, if that's the case, then you're just going to be wrong and stay wrong forever. Well, what the 10% are doing is that they want to be consistent, but also in being consistent with their process is a review process. That
Yeah.
review process happens at a specific time. And in a certain way, and all that stuff is planned out. So that's how you have this self-improvement system where you are continuously getting better, and it's all very intentional.
And so, yeah, and I'll throw in some amplification on that also. If you're a mechanical system trader,
Hmm.
okay, I don't care what my trades do. Okay. Why? Because I've already built in my protection. My basically my protection of my stop losses and all that kind of stuff. And so if I do a technical analysis on a a stock or an ETF, and it looks like I have a really great setup, and I plan the trade out, take the trade, and if it goes against me and I get
Hmm.
stopped out for a loss, that doesn't
Right.
mean I'm wrong. That in reality means I am right because my system took care of me. So
Right.
again, I take the definition of right or wrong is removed from the equation. And
Mm.
it's it the then the question for me becomes, how well am I following, as you said, my process, my system, and that's what helps me be consistent in my trading. So
Mhm.
so we've got and so I'll just wrap up with a couple of different things and some action steps you can take. Our takeaways from today's session is one, audit your current trading questions. Are they about failure or about success? Ooh, write out the process you'll commit to for the next 30 days. I encourage people to, pick no more than, have a trading plan that contains no more than 5 or 6 steps. You can focus
Mhm.
on that. And you may want to just choose one thing. Maybe it's, your issue is uh, not getting in at the right time or not doing your necessary review and due diligence. And so you commit to fixing that one thing. Um,
Mhm.
find an accountability partner or trade community. Don't go it alone. And in the recap,
Yeah.
the real secret, it's not about why traders fail, but it's about what the winners are doing daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, year after year after year. That makes the difference. So again, check out both autopilottraders.com and marawealth.com for more support, tools, and community. So if you've ever doubted yourself, remember, every top trader started exactly where you are right now. So, Mike, any thoughts?
Yeah,
Any final thoughts?
yeah, the last thing that I think that people need, I think that there's a lot of hard workers out there, particularly in our audience too. I don't think that you listen to something like this for an hour and not be a hard worker. What I think that people need are more structure. And I think that it's that
Yeah.
structure. Once you have structure in place, that's what's going to take you from where you're at to where it is that you want to go. So answer the questions that Dennis laid out. Those action steps I think are fantastic, and guess we'll see you next week.
Okay. So excellent. So, guys, hey, if today's episode shifted your mindset, do leave a comment. Let's celebrate your first step towards the 10%er, towards being a 10%er. And then next time, we're exposing the most dangerous trading myths and how to bust them for good in your trading. So you don't want to miss it next Monday. What time? 11 o'clock. And I want to thank personally, and I know Mike does also, the 154 people who are actually with us listening and watching this session. And please let the world know about us because Mike and I, you know, one, we love helping other traders to succeed. So I'll say
Mhm.
aloha and God bless everybody.
Take care. God bless.